Hi, today is August 20th, 2012. This is the LaRouche Pat Candidate Show. I'm Jason Ross, filling in for Matt Ogden. With me here are Diane Sayre from New Jersey and Lyndon LaRouche, and joining us via video, we've got Bill Roberts in Detroit, Dave Christie in Washington State, Keisha Rogers in Texas, and Rachel Brown in Boston. So, Lynn, what do you have for us?
Well, I've just produced something which is now finished. It's entitled Next Beyond Mars, and it looks a little bit at the future, beginning now approximately, where we are going to go, what we're going to do as we enter this particular period of the so-called election year. And this is going to be a very dirty and very important election year. Right now, there is no one who is clearly a winner among the designated leading candidates. The mess is going to get worse. If Obama is actually renominated, I would expect a catastrophe for the United States of the probably horror type. And therefore, since we have no indications of any strong surge with a significant minority who's disposed to do the right thing, but we don't have any indication of a clear majority which is going to vote for the human cause in terms of the candidates available for president. And that's crucial because this may be the extinction of civilization may occur. We have to remember that we're on the verge of thermonuclear war. And as long as Obama remains a presidential candidate or nominee, the likelihood of thermonuclear war is great because Russia and China are not going to capitulate to the Obama regime, which means that Obama, if he's in charge, and if people are as cowardly among the citizens as I found them recently, then we will go to thermonuclear war, and that will be the extinction of humanity. It will also be the demonstration of a humanity which is not worthy of anything short of extinction, because they haven't earned it. People who are patriots have an obligation to make sure that Obama does not become president, and he's not nominated to become president either. Only under those conditions do we have any assured hope of survival for mankind. And that's a fact. Now, whether people wish to believe that or not is not really relevant. It's relevant to the case of survival, but if people are not committed to keep Obama out of the presidency, they have qualified themselves not to survive. And let's see how that plays for a while.
Well, I think you're right. I was thinking this morning, actually, that what we're facing on the planet right now is probably the worst conjunctural crisis that mankind has ever faced. On the other hand, I think what you see with this landing of Curiosity is the way that there's an intent which drives creativity. And the people at JPL who figured out this quite extraordinary landing of something over a ton with 200 pounds of very delicate equipment, so you couldn't have the rocket come down because there would be too much dust. And what they came up with, they said, it looked a little crazy to us, but it was the only thing that we could think of that could work. And I really think, in a sense, that's the driver for the removal of Obama now. We have to take that approach. We can't give people a recipe of first such and such is going to happen and then such and such. People have to know in their gut what is going to be the fate of human existence if this guy remains in there. And if people can get that, then there's plenty of evidence, there's plenty of things that could unfold where this guy could be out instantaneously. But it is that question of people having the courage to actually face reality.
That was demonstrated most clearly in Detroit. The point was that people were tending to vote in the direction which made sense. But when they were challenged by Obama's thuggery, they capitulated. Mm-hmm. They threw away their birthright. Their right to exist was thrown away by them because they acted like cowards merely from the barking of an Obama. And that is the thing that worries everyone. Yeah. The point is we have probably about 40% of the U.S. voting population is in a range of making a good vote somewhere along the line here. But that's only 40%. And you have a lot of dumb and cowardly people. And you have all these youth, for example, who can become a factor in terms of participating. And you see the condition of the youth under the age of 25, and you worry, because they don't have, in general, any criteria. Only a tiny minority of them have any criteria at all, which is rational at all. And therefore, this is the kind of situation we face, in which we can see the extinction of civilization and even the human species coming up as a lack of guts on the part of leading people inside the United States. And they have no right and no excuse for not having the guts needed to ensure that this nation and the civilization generally exists. Remember, Obama is committed. He is the Emperor Nero. He is a remake of the Emperor Nero. Everything that he's done since he became, when he was actually nominated for the Democratic presidency, since that time, his thuggery, which is the means by which he's maintained his influence, is pure thuggery. And people of this country have not resisted that thuggery. The American citizen has become less and less able to resist that thuggery. You see, for example, take the first 2 years of the Obama administration. That was Obama light, but I knew it was not going to stay that way. And once we entered the second half term of Obama, and that he came out full blast with the Emperor Nero characteristics. And anyone who says that's over the top has to be under the bridge or under something deeper. But the only reason they say no, not over the top, is because they're cowards. They're yellow-bellied cowards. It's like a certain bird, the yellow-bellied sucker. I mean, the yellow-bellied cowards. People who say that's over the top, that they are yellow-bellied cowards. And that is not just a fact. That's the kind of fact which can turn out the kind of vote which would re-elect this Obama. And the re-election of Obama is probably the cause for the extinction of the human species. And people better think about that and not their petty little opinions. This man is a killer. He's demonstrated he's a mad killer. He violates the law with his killings. This is a violation of the law.
Yeah, we had a situation at this platform hearing where there were a number of people who were committed to either introducing the resolution, or once a Glass-Steagall amendment would have been introduced, they would have supported it, and everyone knew that this thing would have passed. But what happened is the leadership of the Democratic Party Platform Committee basically intervened and said, this isn't your fight. This is LaRouche's fight, and it's already in the Congress. So we don't have to worry about this. We don't have to bother Obama with taking this up at this point. And the problem is that it actually worked, is that they accepted the idea that, no, this isn't my fight. This is someone else's fight. I don't have to be the one personally intervening. And I think that's something that we have to think about in the context of this Mars Curiosity landing, because if you cannot think about, if you don't have the imagination to think about how the future is going to be changed and envision it in your own mind, and then realize that you have to be the person to bring about that change, then it's not going to happen. And what I think the successful landing of Curiosity does is it provides a living image of the future that's already been achieved now. And so it's a point of optimism for anyone who says, well, things aren't going to really change anyway, so therefore I'm off the hook.
And they're off the hook on the kind of conditions where the threat is either way, thermonuclear war. Thermonuclear war can be launched and fought but it cannot assure any survivors. Because when you get to that, look, take the case of what Obama has as his forces under his command, as they appear now, and you take what Russia, China are on the other side, essentially. Now, when they go out, think they're going to war, and they know that Obama intends to go to war, they're going to go to war. They're going to go to war with everything they have up front. And when you get the same thing from the U.S. side, you don't have any likelihood of much survival on this planet. The initial kill, just from the initial exchange of thermonuclear weapons, is sufficient to ensure the extinction of the human species, not all at once. But you have to think of if when you hit the planet with the assault that comes on as the initial rounds of assault on the thermonuclear weapons, the conditions of the planet left by that assault now sets up a situation in the weather and everything else in which it's doubtful that the survivors of the initial war will survive. This is what these guys are playing with. This is what the supporters of Obama in particular are playing with. Yes, among, the Republican candidates are a bunch of damn fools. They're not worth anything, and it's not even worth fighting them. But the issue of getting Obama out and throwing him out now is a life or death question confronting not only the United States itself, but the world. And if people don't have the guts to throw this bum out of office before September 3rd or sometime soon after that, if that doesn't exist, I don't think there's any likely guarantee of the survival of the human species on this planet. And that's the issue. And that when you talk about somebody, I'm supporting Obama, that's the issue you want to look this guy in the eye on. Yes, you're going to support Obama? It's about time people woke up to reality. They should know it's been known for a long time, ever since the middle of the 1960s. It's been known with the Khrushchev experiment, that the density of that experiment, that thermonuclear war would be extinction war. And that's what's being played with now. And this idiot, this pig, this immoral creature called our president, who probably was never actually honestly elected president anyway, right? This specimen, shall we call him, is allowed by people, this guy they could throw out of office easily if they had the guts and brains to do so. And this is all now that I know of that threatens humanity. Therefore, the best solution is get him out of office now. That settles the question, and the rest of us can come up with something. But get him out of office. Don't renominate him at any cost.
Yeah, the resistance comes in the form of, well, it's not that bad. Yes, people will say, I know that he's using drones to kill people, but it's not that bad. Yes, I love Glass-Steagall. I know you're right, and I support it, but, Obama, he can't really be that bad, right? And that is a complete denial of the fact that the signs have been, one after the other, exactly what you're saying. That if Obama remains in office, we will have a push for thermonuclear war, and we will have an intentional destruction of the U.S. economy and the global economy. But yes, you're exactly right, and I think that point has to be made clearly that if Obama is not put out of office, this is clearly what will happen.
Yeah.
I think what also should be emphasized is that we're looking at a condition right now where the horrific conditions in which you've just described is very much already prevalent in the nation, where we find ourselves without a national government, without the emergency ability to respond to the crisis that's already hitting the nation and devastating populations throughout the country. And, you know, there was a report that was made on the Greek situation, and where you have a situation where Greek citizens are so desperate right now that they're having to resort to desperate measures to be able to get assistance, injecting themselves with HIV virus, committing suicide. I mean, this is what you call a collapse of civilization. And we face the same thing in the United States right now. There is a growing recognition and outcry against this threat of thermonuclear war, as we've seen with what just came out with a former Treasury official from Nixon, Paul Craig Roberts, warning of this threat of thermonuclear war that we have been actually exposing for quite some time. And it's only going to be a very short period of time that people can actually hold this thing back. General Dempsey, the others who are saying we got to stop this threat of thermonuclear war. And the only thing that's going to stop this is, just as we've been saying, you've been repeatedly stating here, is that Obama has to go. And when you have a situation where in the United States, we can't even respond to the crisis of the starvation, the food crisis, when we're getting reports from collaborators and representatives of the farmers associations and looking at the harsh conditions that are facing our American farmers. We're not just talking about a few farmers who are losing things and facing hard times. We're talking about the inability of our nation to be able to sustain itself. When farmers are having to liquidate all their assets, having to go pull their money out of the banks, when they're having to face conditions where they can't even feed themselves, all of their crops are being destroyed. We are destroying our corn crops. Everything in terms of our ability to be a productive nation is being destroyed. And if people are saying, well, it can't be that bad, I mean, they're completely delusional, because it's already that bad. I mean, we are facing a collapse of civilization right now, and it's not even a matter of whether or not this thing is going to wait till September. It's already underway, and the question of survival, I would say, really depends on something that Mrs. LaRouche brought up in discussions yesterday with the representatives of the organization, where, as she iterated, there has to be a total paradigm shift of the last 45 years, a commitment to the precedent that took place and stood before the assassination of President Kennedy. And I just wanted to say something on that, because that just really struck home with me. If people think about it, I mean, none of us on this call were alive during the time of President Kennedy. But we are the ones who are carrying the torch to try to really bring back that legacy and that tradition. And I had an opportunity. I was in Boston with Rachel this past week for her campaign, and I had an opportunity to visit the Kennedy Museum in Boston. And one of the things that was striking to me is that they said they had the debate of President Kennedy and Richard Nixon for the presidency in 1960. And you just think about what type of paradigm would have already been created had Kennedy not become the president, had Nixon been elected, how we would have already been faced with the threat of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the threat of segregation and everything that was going on would have still existed under Nixon. The threat that was facing economic conditions would have still existed under Nixon. But because the population decided to take courage and decided to fight and knew what was at stake for the nation, for mankind, they put in someone who would actually answer the call of what was necessary to lead the nation at that period of time. And since then, there has been an attack on the culture, an attack on the population to break and destroy everything that the Kennedy precedent had set into place. And that's why it's our mission right now to reverse that last 40 years, 45 years of destruction, of cultural destruction, and bring back the type of optimism that we've been discussing here that is put forth with the ideas that go with what curiosity represents, what this national mission and a space program represents. And I just think people have to get that sense right now that our mission in this nation is to really move the population toward a total revolution in the culture and the way that people are thinking.
In response to that, I have just produced something for publication, which will be going into works now, on the subject of Next Beyond Mars. The issue is that while there's much praise for the landing on Mars, there's not enough deep insight into what this is and how mankind is participating. People are reacting to it as something beautiful, something nice, something great, and so forth, and they don't have a sense of their own real role in it or their own personal role with respect to it. For example, what this does, among other things, it sets into motion a practical program for saving Earth and people on Earth from a threat of extinction. In this case, the threat of extinction comes from missiles, large objects called various kinds of things, which land on Earth. They land regularly. They come in like a freight train on schedule, and they come in terms of the long term, in terms of the history of mankind as we know it, is a long term on schedule. We're now going into a period where we question exactly how this pattern of great rocks and the similar kind, or maybe some great comet, comes in and wipes us all out. That this is the conditions we have to deal with. So what's happening on the Mars landing is clear. We in our mind, and most people make the mistake of misunderstanding how the human mind works, but our mind as human beings is now represented not on Earth, but represented by people on Mars. How are they on Mars? Their mental activity, their influence is directly expressed on Mars in terms of the way the human mind works. All these things that we have, we call elements, gimmicks, or whatnot, on this Mars operation is significant. But the essential thing is the human mind, the creative powers of the human mind, which are now on every kind of communication between Earth and Mars. The human mind is represented on Mars. In other words, we're not people living on Earth and then sending messages or love notes or whatever to Mars. We are people whose mind, that is the mind of the responsible people, is going directly, as fast as the speed of light, to Mars. And that's the control mechanism. So the human personality is now an active citizen of Mars, because it's only the lapse of time at the speed of light which connects the human mind to the apparatus which is being controlled on Mars. And that's the reality before us. This is the greatest experience that mankind has ever had in what we know of human existence now. The time that we, human beings, who've only been a few million so years on this planet, we human beings now have the power to begin to shape the solar system, at least from within the range of the orbit of Mars. We are now putting apparatus up there, and we can put up more of the same kind of apparatus, in which human minds are actually controlling what is happening on Mars. And this is a part of the program where we have to defend Earth against the great rocks and comets and what things that may hit Earth and exterminate the human population. Mankind is now had a greater grip on his own destiny. by virtue of this Mars landing program. And the Mars landing program that this president did everything possible to stop. And that we know now, with the additional dangers, the unsolved dangers, the ones we know are there, but we don't know what the magnitude is or where they are. We're not prepared to deal with them. We now need exactly what this president forbids. We need to extend this thing to find out what those rocks are that are going to hit us and get the apparatus in place to prevent those rocks from hitting Earth and destroying the human population generally. So the human survival is now in our hands. And one of the first things, if you're going to survive at all, is get this guy out of there now. Because this thing has done something, this operation, this landing on Mars, this has created a new situation in which the minds of human beings on Earth are going to operate from Mars, under human command from Mars. And we need more of that. We can probably ship the president to Mars and maybe they can handle him up there.
Well, one aspect of this, which is very exciting and a beautiful model, is the number of nations that are involved, that Russia, Spain, people have their own scientific experiments that are all on this. So in that sense, the population here on Earth has a unified sense of mission across cultures and languages in this development.
This is humanity. This is real humanity when you think the nations that are cooperating with us. And that's it. This is humanity. And Obama is not humanity. He's inhumanity. But he should be out of it.
You know, Lynn, I think going back and you look at what Obama has done, every bit of it, you know, what Rachel referenced with the drones, the National Defense Authorization Act, all of these evil things, the invasion of Libya and so forth, the threatened war that we face now, which is the war to end civilization. Yet I find it very striking that when you actually called for his impeachment, it was around the issue of the defunding of NASA, when he just got rid of the manned space flight to Mars, or, you know, the manned space flight and the perspective that would be needed to actually get man to Mars. But it's very striking that call for impeachment, and now what we have with the landing of the rover on Mars, which portends the SDI concept, or the SDE concept, which is, you know, what the Russians had put back on the table after the invasion of Libya, when you said that they were going to go into Syria and Iran as a means to set up the much larger war against Russia and China. And that was when the Russians brought back the SDE and specifically called for that the SDE was going to be for new physical principles, which is an unmistakable reference to the type of economic policy, the type of initiatives, the technological expansion, and so on that is going to be needed to get mankind to the future. So, but I just think that it's this point where this Mars landing represents everything that is just the reason to get Obama out.
Yes.
And there's so much sometimes people have the idea that we know almost everything now, that science has sort of reached an end, that we've answered a lot of the questions. Even just the number of asteroids that are threatening us, you might think that with all of our new technologies, we've discovered most of them. That's not the case at all. Every year we're discovering, the rate of discovery of new asteroids that could potentially strike the Earth is actually increasing. So that if you just continued at the rate of discovery that we've got, there's about 300,000 at least near-Earth objects that are large enough, maybe not to destroy all of human civilization, but would be enough to destroy a whole state. And it's essential, we don't even have the ability to actually track these things, to know what their orbits really are. And being on Mars, developing more different sensory perceptions to understand this thing is absolutely crucial, and we can't leave it up as something that we'll hope we don't get hit. We've got the ability to make these discoveries. We have to actually plan out what's our future going to be, and not think, well, we didn't do it in the past and we managed. You know?
But there's a cycle, and the cycle goes up and the cycle goes down.
And that's an important thing we can find out on Mars.
Yes, exactly. And if we get to Mars, we can do other things beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing, the voice and mind of humanity will reach across the space of solar space to other locations, landing locations, in which the body of the person, living body, cannot be dropped, but the living personality can extend remote control over the behavior of these parts of the solar system. And that's where we must go, and that's where we are going, if we can just get this president out of office. But the key thing is this whole idea, the point is, it's not the fact that we on Earth are reaching out and shaping what's happening on Mars. It's the fact that we on Earth, at the speed of light, can exercise apparatus put on these planetary places and build up apparatus which we can control, which will operate on these distant locations. And thus the mind of man is no longer limited to the body of the man. The mind of man, the creative mind of man, can operate at a distance from his body, to a distant place even in the solar system, such as Mars. And it's the mind of man which is present there, actively, efficiently present through this apparatus, which is the necessary means by which we can defend the existence of the human species within this solar system. And we just should get about it and do it. We've begun. Let's not quit now.
Good. Well, it sounds like we've certainly got our work cut out for us, and soon.
That's right. Why not? But this is exactly what makes life more than meaningful. The fact that you, on Earth, through the aid of these kinds of instruments, on these distant bodies, and in the area in between, can act to protect human life and to look at Mars. Was there life on Mars? The big question they keep asking. Well, that's an important question. And it's a very important psychological question for mankind. If Mars was inhabited by some kind of creatures at some time in the past, then we are all the more determined that if life worked there, for them, us, we can do the same. Mm-hmm. And we can participate, not just as a distance, we can participate in the development of the solar system. And all these things will become increasingly available to us as we go to higher and higher levels of science and technology. And the meaning of the life of the individual means more per individual inside the entire solar system than it ever did before. And that's a pretty good thing to do.
Yeah, that makes very clear the idea of the creative identity of man, because, you know, as you're saying, we've seen the fact that Mars used to most likely have water, you know, due to the riverbeds and whatnot, water ice. If there did used to be an atmosphere or liquid water on Mars, which we can reproduce with the changing conditions and actualize the potential of life, which you're talking about. And then also, just to illustrate for people a little bit the idea of the different types of instrumentation, that yes, this is a rover on Mars. It's measuring, it's measuring infrared, it's measuring the different types of elements that are there, with spectroscopy, but that is virtually the same as a human sensory apparatus, although we don't think about that very much. You know, what is our hearing and our sight and our sense of touch? These are generally, electromagnetic phenomena. So people may think, oh, well, it's a metal machine. That's different than a human biological apparatus. But if you think about actually the types of sensory investigations that are being done, it's just very, very similar. So I don't know, that just to illustrate that point for people a little bit, that you may think it's different, but it's actually not that different from actual human presence on Mars. But then just to bring that back with the water question, it just does illustrate the idea of the potential of synthesis, human synthesis for creating the new conditions.
Well, think of something.
We already crafted this machine that's there. Why can't we craft other things?
Well, there's also something quite wonderful which is made obvious by considering the implications of what this landing on Mars has meant. There's the human mind, and the human mind can express its will electronically across the distance between Earth orbit and Mars orbit. What is it? It's the human mind. Now you have people think that the human mind is the will of sense perception and reactions to sense perception, but that's not it. The human mind that operates from Earth as a willful mind directing what's going to happen on Mars is not responding to sense perception as such. They're responding to ideas. And we live in a society which has got a very primitive culture relative to what used to exist. We believe in sense perception. But that sense perception does not define the human mind. Sense perception is something which the human mind responds to. But when you, as a person on Earth, are acting as part of a team which is running an operation on Mars, there's no sense perception up there except that of the things you put in as the parts. There's no human will in the control of that. The will lies in a human being back here on Earth. So you say that now the human mind is something which is more powerful and relatively independent, relatively speaking, to the sense perceptual view of reality. And we have to realize that in the history of human culture, humanity has often taken a step backward, as with the Roman Empire and similar kinds of phenomena. Backward. But it's the human mind as such which is unique. It's the only form of life we know which has willful control over itself and over the environment in which it operates. And that mind of the human individual, that immortal quality of mind as such, which is independent of sense perception as such. Sense perception is merely something which is controlled by the mind. And the mind's experience is the experience of exerting power over sense perception. And you realize that there's something very special, a principle of mind, which is more powerful than anything we generally know, admit, and discuss in society. And that's what we're seeing in motion with this operation on Mars. We're seeing a redefinition of the meaning of humanity. It's a definition which has always existed, as long as man existed. But the ability to comprehend that principle is what has been lost through the seeds of oligarchism in society. It's when we had classical art is the typification of this principle of something which is distinct from the physical control by the mind over things. And this is what we have to get back to from classical artistic composition. And we have to realize that the future of mankind lies in man's capacity for classical forms of artistic composition. And that becomes morality. The idea that you're creating something which the human mind recognizes as good and creating it at a distance. Operating from Earth, you on Earth are, with your mind, is controlling what is happening on Mars. And that is transmitted at the speed of light. And when you get that conception of what man is and what man's destiny is, you begin to get rid of all this garbage. And that should be our objective.
All right. Let's do that.
Well, okay, let's do it.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.